I sat quietly at the dinner table while the parents of my future son-in-law insulted my intelligence in perfect French, unaware that I understood every single syllable. At 62 years old, I finally learned that life delivers defining tests when we feel invisible. My name is Eleanor Vance, and for decades I shrank so my ex-husband could stand tall. After my divorce 4 years ago, I began the terrifying process of discovering the woman I used to be. Back in my early 20s, armed with a degree in foreign literature and absolutely zero common sense, I purchased a one-way ticket to France. I needed to prove my independence far away from familiar watchful eyes and the heavy silence of my disapproving father. I settled in the bustling city of Lyon because I craved an authentic and chaotic experience far away from tourist traps. I initially planned to stay 3 months to polish my language skills before returning to America. Instead, I stayed 8 incredible years, learning the rapid dialect of the region from street vendors who bluntly corrected my grammar. Survival demanded I master their slang completely. During my second year working as a waitress in a loud local tavern, I met David while he was completing a temporary engineering contract abroad. He charmed me by loudly criticizing a modern art exhibit in English, assuming nobody could understand his complaints. We bonded instantly over that shared cultural isolation. He eventually convinced me to return to the United States, ending my European chapter. I became a quiet suburban wife and soon after welcomed my beautiful daughter Sarah into the world. The fierce young woman who navigated complex foreign streets faded into a polite teacher who frequented local farmers' markets. I kept my second language alive only by silently translating my thoughts while gardening alone. The reality of those adventures remained a distant, vague abstraction to my growing child. The end of my long marriage happened slowly through a gradual erosion of my self-esteem. David spent a decade delivering tiny criticisms until I learned to apologize for simply existing in the same room. When he announced he was leaving me for someone else, the most shocking realization was my own complete lack of surprise. I retreated into a painfully quiet life, questioning my worth. Sarah had established herself as a successful designer in Chicago and was deeply in love with a structural engineer named Julian Sterling. His wealthy parents took immense pride in their Belgian heritage and sophisticated lineage. When Sarah announced their engagement, she nervously begged me to make a good impression during an upcoming weekend trip to a lakeside cabin. I desperately wanted to support her happiness. I drove to the luxurious waterfront property fighting a fierce battle against my own lingering insecurities. Sylvia and Victor, the elegant parents of Julian, were already sipping drinks on the expansive wooden deck. Sylvia greeted me with superficial double-cheek kisses, wearing expensive linen and a strained smile. Victor shook my hand with polite dismissal, treating me exactly like hired help rather than equal family. The evening sun painted the water in brilliant shades of gold as we gathered around the patio for appetizers. I sat quietly on the edge while the future in-laws conversed rapidly with Julian in their native French. They naturally assumed the quiet American mother possessed absolutely no comprehension of their sophisticated language. I sipped my wine in silence with the practiced patience of the ignored. Sarah stepped inside the cabin to check on the dinner preparations, leaving me alone with her future family. Sylvia immediately leaned toward Victor and remarked in flawless French that the cabin was terribly rustic for their refined tastes. Victor chuckled and replied that Americans used rugged nature to compensate for their tragic lack of actual culture. I kept my breathing perfectly steady and absorbed their arrogant judgment. Julian returned with fresh glasses just as Sylvia offered another unprompted opinion in her native tongue. She stated that Sarah seemed like a very sweet girl, though undeniably simple and tragically unpolished in her personal tastes. Julian immediately defended his future bride, but his mother claimed she meant it as a compliment. She argued that simple women were wonderfully uncomplicated, ignoring the cruelty of her backhanded praise. We moved to the dining room where Sarah proudly served a complex beef stew she had spent weeks perfecting. Victor praised the meal in English before asking about my career as a retired school teacher. He gave a patronizing nod to my answer, clearly deciding my existence was completely unremarkable. He then turned back to Sylvia and resumed his private commentary in French across the table. Victor confidently told his wife that he finally understood why our dear Sarah possessed such a profound lack of elegance. He suggested her mother was a simple woman who had clearly never experienced the broader world. Sylvia softly agreed in French, noting that ordinary people simply lacked the ambition to build extraordinary lives. Sarah sensed a shift in the atmosphere and asked if everything was fine. Victor refilled his glass and expressed a deep fear that his son would spend his entire life carrying the burden of an uncultured wife. He desperately wanted his future grandchildren to possess a strong foundation of heritage rather than the empty background of our family. I watched him speak these cruel words with absolute certainty that his secrets were safe. I waited patiently for my perfect moment. I placed my silver fork delicately upon my ceramic plate and looked directly into the eyes of the arrogant man. Speaking in the specific, rapid French dialect of the region of Lyon, I suggested he was severely underestimating the strength of roots he could not see. The ensuing silence fell over the room like a heavy stone. Victor froze completely, while Sylvia stared at me in total horror. Victor slowly lowered his drink and carefully acknowledged that I spoke his language fluently. I confirmed this fact, explaining that I spent 8 years mastering the tongue on the challenging streets of a major European city. Sylvia nervously whispered a question about exactly how much of their private conversation I had comprehended. I calmly assured her that I understood every single cruel remark regarding my beautiful daughter. My heartbeat hammered furiously against my ribs as I kept my voice perfectly level and steady. I explained that my daughter was direct rather than simple, because she viewed truthfulness as the highest form of respect. I demanded they stop measuring her against their invisible standards of pretension. I refused to let them project their narrow judgments onto a young woman who possessed endless curiosity and deep intelligence. I then addressed their assumptions about my supposedly small and insignificant existence. I revealed the vibrant youth I spent navigating foreign restaurants, learning a difficult language through sheer survival, and building a life of profound bravery. I explained that choosing to become a dedicated mother did not erase the courageous adventures of my past. I watched their condescending expressions melt into genuine shame regarding their arrogant assumptions. Sarah returned carrying a beautiful dessert, completely unaware of the dramatic shift in the atmosphere. Sylvia immediately offered a sincere and deeply embarrassed apology, treating me with newfound respect that stripped away her earlier artificial warmth. Victor eagerly asked questions about my time abroad, bonding over a mutual acquaintance who once ran a famous tavern we both cherished. The thick tension transformed into a genuine, unexpected mutual connection. Later that evening, Sylvia sat beside me on the velvet sofa and offered a final private apology for her unfair judgments. She admitted her tendency to make cruel assumptions out of nervousness, and praised the wonderful character of the woman her son loved. I realized then that silencing my past had only served to diminish my own light. Reclaiming my voice finally resurrected the fearless woman I was meant to be.